Ethan had always considered himself an ordinary man. He wasn't rich, famous, or a hero in the traditional sense, but today he found himself aboard a massive alien ship, surrounded by towering beings from all corners of the galaxy. He had been sent on a simple diplomatic mission to open peaceful relations between humans and the various alien species who made up the Galactic Alliance. The event was grand, with intricate decorations from hundreds of different worlds. The air was filled with strange melodic music, and the room buzzed with conversations in languages Ethan could barely understand. The aliens wore elaborate outfits that shimmered under the artificial lights, and their eyes, so many colors and shapes, seemed to study him as if he were an anomaly. Ethan stood awkwardly by the refreshments table, sipping a drink that tasted like nothing he had ever tried before. He had been trained for this. He knew how to shake hands, how to smile politely, how to nod at the right moments, but there was something unsettling about this new world. The eyes of the aliens seemed to see right through him, as if they could tell that he didn't belong here. Then, she walked in. Queen Lyra, ruler of the Zephyr, the warrior race that had once dominated entire star systems. She was not like the others. While the other guests were tall and graceful, Lyra had a presence that made everyone else seem small. Her eyes were a deep violet, her skin dark like the deepest night, and her hair, long and silver, flowed around her shoulders like a waterfall. She wore a regal robe, lined with golden symbols of her people, and a crown that seemed to glow faintly, as if it were alive. As she moved, there was a power to her steps, a confidence that sent ripples through the crowd. People stepped aside when she passed. Conversation stopped. Even the music seemed to slow down as though it too understood the importance of her presence. Ethan couldn't help but stare. There was something about her, something undeniable. It wasn't just her beauty, though she was certainly stunning. It was the way she commanded the room, the way her eyes met his and held him there even from across the room. He took a nervous step forward, trying to blend into the crowd, but as he did, he found himself right in her path. Queen Lyra stopped in front of him. Her violet eyes seemed to glow, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. "Human," she said, her voice low and melodic, carrying a weight that made Ethan feel both insignificant and important all at once. Ethan froze. "Your Majesty," he stammered, his voice suddenly small in the vast room. She didn't smile. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her gaze never leaving his. "You will come with me." Without waiting for a reply, she turned and began walking. Ethan, bewildered, hesitated for only a moment before following her. He had no idea what was happening, but something told him it was not a situation he could afford to refuse. They walked across the grand hall, the crowd parting like water in their path. As they neared the far end of the room, Queen Lyra stopped, turning to face him. Her advisors and friends stood nearby, waiting. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say anything, the Queen raised her hand. "This is my husband," she declared, her voice carrying easily to the entire room. Ethan blinked in surprise, his mind struggling to catch up with her words. The crowd gasped, and whispers began to swirl through the room. He didn't know how to react. This was not a greeting. It was a proclamation. The Queen, a ruler feared by many, had just announced him as her husband. Her words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. The room went silent, all eyes now on them. "Pardon?" Ethan finally managed, his voice thick with confusion. Lyra turned to her companions, all of whom seemed as shocked as he was. But the Queen herself remained unbothered, her face serene as though this was the most natural thing in the galaxy. The people around her exchanged looks. Then one of the advisors stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Your Majesty, we were not informed of this union," Lyra smiled. It wasn't a smile of kindness, but one that spoke of hidden strength. She nodded toward Ethan, who still stood there in a daze. "I do not need to inform you. This is destiny. The prophecy is clear. He is the one." Ethan was still trying to piece it all together. What prophecy? What was she talking about? He had never heard of such a thing. He was just a human, standing here on an alien ship, suddenly declared the husband of the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. What do you mean, Queen Lyra?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She looked at him again, her violet eyes softening for a brief moment. "You will understand soon, human. Come with me. The council has much to discuss." Still reeling, Ethan followed as she led him away from the crowd and into a smaller, more private chamber. The room was adorned with intricate alien art. strange geometric patterns that shifted as if alive. The air smelled of something sweet like jasmine, though he knew it was not a flower he recognized. Once inside, Lyra turned to face him. "This is not an ordinary marriage," she said, her voice suddenly much softer but still firm. "You and we are bound by fate. The galaxy has waited for this moment for centuries, and I have waited for you." Ethan's head spun. "I don't understand," he murmured. "You will," she replied with a gentle smile. "The prophecy speaks of a human who will stand by my side, not as a servant or a companion, but as an equal. Together we will bring peace to this galaxy. Together we will rule." Ethan swallowed, trying to process everything she had just said. A human ruler? His mind raced with the possibilities, but one question stood out above all the others. Why him? Before he could ask, Lyra placed a hand on his arm. "You do not have to understand everything now. What matters is that you are here, and you have been chosen." As her hand lingered on his arm, Ethan couldn't deny the strange sense of connection he felt to her. It was as if he were already a part of her world, as if this was a destiny he hadn't chosen but was destined to follow. He wasn't sure if he believed in prophecies or fate, but something told him that whatever was coming next, his life would never be the same. And so, with a mixture of confusion, awe, and a strange sense of purpose, Ethan took his first step into a future he couldn't have possibly imagined. Ethan's mind was still spinning after Queen Lyra's proclamation. The words she had spoken echoed in his head. "This is my husband." He had never expected anything like this to happen. One moment he was a simple human diplomat, and the next, he found himself at the heart of an alien prophecy, declared as the husband of the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. Lyra had escorted him to a private chamber, away from the eyes of the crowd. There she had spoken of a prophecy that spoke of a human who would join the Zephyr Queen on the throne. Ethan wasn't sure whether to believe her, but there was something in the way she spoke, in her gaze, that made him think she wasn't lying. As the door to the chamber closed behind him, he felt the weight of the situation settle in. Lyra stood near a large table, her back turned to him, looking out at the stars through the ship's wide windows. The stars seemed to stretch endlessly in the distance, an endless sea of lights in the darkness. It was beautiful, but Ethan couldn't enjoy it. His thoughts were elsewhere. "Why me?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. Lyra turned to face him, her expression calm and collected. "The prophecy is not just a prediction, Ethan. It is a truth that has been passed down through generations of my people. A human will one day stand beside me. Together we will rule and bring balance to the galaxy." Ethan felt his stomach twist. "But I'm just a man. I'm not a ruler. I don't know anything about ruling. I'm just here to help, to talk about peace and trade agreements. This is something else." Lyra's gaze softened, and for a moment she stepped closer to him. "The prophecy did not say you needed to be a ruler," she said. "It said you would be my equal and that together we would lead. You may not feel ready, but there is something within you. Something I see in you that no one else does." Ethan swallowed, unsure of what to say. "I don't understand," he murmured. "How can I be the one the prophecy speaks of? I'm just a man from Earth. I don't belong in this galaxy." "You do now," Lyra said, her voice firm yet gentle. "You are not just from Earth. You are the one the galaxy has been waiting for." As Lyra spoke, the more Ethan began to question the strange sense of connection he felt toward her. He didn't understand it, but something in her words made him feel like he was not just a random choice. There was purpose in this. "Why did you choose me?" Ethan asked. "Why not someone else? Why not another Zephyr?" Lyra's face grew serious, and she walked over to a nearby table where a holographic display of the galaxy appeared. The stars and planets floated in midair, shimmering with light. "I have spent years searching for the one who would fulfill the prophecy," Lyra explained. "And when I saw you, something changed.
I knew in that moment that you were the one."
"I cannot explain it, Ethan. The connection is more than just prophecy. It is instinct. I have felt it all my life, and now I know it is true." Ethan watched the display of stars for a moment, feeling the weight of her words. He wanted to argue, to tell her that he wasn't the right person for this role. But deep down, he couldn't deny the strange pull he felt toward her, and the possibility that something bigger than both of them was at play here. Still, there were so many questions. What does this mean for me? For Earth? Am I supposed to leave my planet behind and become something else? Lyra paused, her gaze fixed on him. I do not know yet. There is much to learn. But together we will face the challenges ahead. There are many who will not accept this union, many who see me as a symbol of strength, and they will not want me to marry outside of my people. We must prepare for what is to come, but together we can overcome anything. Ethan stood in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling on him. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about an entire galaxy, and it seemed as though his life had just been pulled into a war that spanned across stars. Lyra turned toward the hologram again, her hand gliding through the projection of the galaxy. The Zephyr people are powerful, but they are divided. There are factions that seek to weaken my rule, and they will not accept a human by my side, even if the prophecy is true. Some may try to use you against me. Others will seek to destroy you. Ethan nodded slowly. I'm not exactly prepared for that. I will help you, Lyra said, her voice strong. You will not face this alone. Ethan looked at her, the seriousness in her eyes striking him. This wasn't just a declaration of marriage. It was a commitment, one that would bind them together in ways neither of them could understand fully yet. But even as the weight of their future settled on him, Ethan couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. He didn't know what the future held, but with Lyra by his side, maybe he could figure it out. A long silence stretched between them before Lyra spoke again. I know this is difficult to understand, Ethan, but this is not just about us. It is about the future of the galaxy. The Zephyr Empire cannot remain divided any longer. We must unite the people, bring them together, and I believe that you are the key. Ethan shook his head slightly, still processing everything. I don't feel like I'm the key to anything. Lyra smiled then, a small, reassuring smile that seemed to light up the room. You will in time. I will make sure of it. She walked over to him, her steps silent on the floor. As she reached his side, she placed a hand gently on his arm. The journey will be hard and there will be sacrifices. But together we will stand strong. You will see. Ethan met her gaze, something stirring in him, a strange feeling of trust that he hadn't felt in years. All right, he said quietly. I'll do this. I'll stand with you. Lyra nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. Then let us begin. And so, as the stars outside twinkled in the distance, Ethan took his first step into a future that was as uncertain as it was inevitable, knowing that this was only the beginning of an adventure that would change the galaxy forever. Ethan had spent the past few days trying to understand the full weight of what had happened. He had been thrown into a world of alien politics and ancient prophecies that he didn't fully understand. The revelation that he was now Queen Lyra's husband, according to the prophecy, had rocked his world. But the real challenge was just beginning. He stood in the grand hall of the Zephyr ship, surrounded by advisors and military leaders. Queen Lyra stood next to him, her presence radiating authority. She had taken him under her wing, teaching him about the politics of the Zephyr Empire, the power struggles, and the factions that fought for control of the galaxy. Every word she spoke felt important yet overwhelming. Ethan felt out of place in this new world, but he was learning quickly that he had no choice but to embrace his new role. The room was filled with Zephyr leaders, tall and imposing figures who studied him with cold, unblinking eyes. Their race was known for its warrior culture, and their people were fierce and proud. Many of them were skeptical of the humans standing beside their queen. Some even sneered at him when they thought Lyra wasn't looking. Ethan had to admit he was nervous. How could a simple human like him fit into this world of powerful beings? But Lyra had been patient, guiding him through the customs, the rituals, and the complex politics that shaped the empire. And now he was about to face his first real test. Ethan, today is important, Lyra said quietly as they walked through the crowded hall. You must prove yourself to them. He glanced at her, confusion in his eyes. Prove myself to who? To the leaders, she replied, her voice steady. There are many who will challenge you. Some will question your place here. Others will try to use you against me. But you must show them that you belong. Show them that you are more than just a man. Ethan swallowed hard. He had no idea how he was supposed to do that. A tall Zephyr officer, dressed in ornate armor, stepped forward. His eyes were dark and intense as they landed on Ethan. Your Majesty, he said, bowing slightly. We are ready for the trials. Ethan blinked, not understanding. Trials? Lyra nodded. Yes, this is the first step. We must demonstrate your strength, your ability to lead, and your worthiness to stand by my side. Ethan felt his heart race. The idea of proving himself in front of these powerful beings was intimidating. He wasn't a warrior. He had never fought in an arena. He had been trained in diplomacy, not combat. But before he could voice his concerns, Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. You are not alone in this. I will be with you every step of the way. The officer gestured for them to follow. Come, he said. It is time. They walked through the hallways of the ship, the walls adorned with intricate alien symbols. The atmosphere was tense, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching him, waiting for him to fail. Soon, they reached a large chamber, a vast arena surrounded by high walls. At the center, there was a platform where the trials would take place. The Ziffer leaders gathered around the edges, their eyes fixed on the stage. Ethan noticed that the arena was not just a place for combat. It was a place for challenges of skill, wit, and strength. This is where it begins, Lyra said, standing beside him. You must face the trials, Ethan. They will test your mind, your body, and your resolve. Show them your worth. Ethan nodded, though he still felt unsure. How could he possibly prove himself against the mighty Ziffer warriors? He was just a human, after all. But something deep inside him pushed him forward. He didn't want to disappoint Lyra. He didn't want to let her down. The first trial was a test of strength. A massive Ziffer warrior, taller and stronger than any human Ethan had ever seen, stepped onto the platform. The warrior raised his arms in challenge, and the crowd roared with excitement. Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. This was not a fight he could win. Do not worry, Lyra whispered. This is not just about physical strength. It is about resolve. The warrior lunged at Ethan with incredible speed, but Ethan reacted quickly, using the skills Lyra had taught him. Instead of meeting the warrior head-on, he dodged to the side, using his opponent's momentum to guide him. The warrior stumbled, momentarily thrown off balance. Ethan didn't waste the opportunity. He stepped forward, using a technique Lyra had shown him to strike a pressure point on the warrior's shoulder. The warrior let out a grunt of surprise, unable to continue his attack. The crowd fell silent. Ethan had won the first trial, not through sheer strength, but by using his mind and quick reflexes. Lyra's eyes glinted with pride as she turned to the assembly. This is my husband, she said proudly. He is more than a warrior. He is a leader. The second trial tested Ethan's strategic mind. He was given a complex scenario in which he had to outmaneuver a group of alien invaders, trying to overtake a Ziffer stronghold. The challenge was one of tactics. Who would Ethan choose to send where and when? Ethan took a deep breath, focusing on the map in front of him. He knew this was his strength. Diplomacy and strategy were his tools, not physical strength. He studied the positions of the enemy and the defenses. He quickly made his decision, deploying the troops in a way that would lead the invaders into a trap. The trial lasted for hours, but in the end, Ethan's plan succeeded. The invaders were defeated, and the Ziffer leaders nodded in approval. Ethan had passed the second trial. Finally, the third trial was a test of leadership and compassion. Ethan was asked to mediate between two factions of the Ziffer people, who were in conflict over resources. Both sides were stubborn, unwilling to compromise. The room grew tense as the two leaders argued, their voices rising in anger. Ethan stood at the center of the room, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been trained for this moment, but it was still daunting. He took a deep breath and spoke, his voice calm yet firm. You both want what is best for your people, Ethan said, but your actions are hurting them. There is a way to find common ground. Let's work together, not against each other. It took hours, but eventually Ethan succeeded. The two factions agreed to a compromise, and the room settled into a quiet, respectful silence. As the trials came to a close, Ethan felt a sense of accomplishment he had never known before. He wasn't just a human caught in an alien world anymore. He was someone who had proven his worth, not through strength alone, but through courage, intellect, and compassion. Lyra stood beside him, her face proud. You have done well, Ethan, she said quietly. You have shown them who you are. Ethan looked around the room, the faces of the Ziffer leaders now filled with respect instead of skepticism. He had done it. He had passed the trials, and in doing so he had earned his place by Lyra's side. But this was just the beginning. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and there were many challenges ahead. Still, Ethan knew that whatever came next, he would face it with Lyra. Together they would overcome anything. Ethan had only just begun to settle into his new life in the Ziffer Empire. The trials had been difficult, but he had passed them with determination. Now there was a sense of accomplishment in the air, and a new respect from the Zyphar people. For the first time, Ethan felt like he belonged, at least among the people who mattered most to him. But as the days passed, an unease settled in. There were whispers, rumors that he couldn't fully understand. Lyra, ever strong and composed, seemed more distant. She had always been busy with her duties as queen, but now there was a tension that Ethan couldn't ignore. Something was changing, and he wasn't sure what it was. One evening, as they sat together in a quiet, private chamber aboard the ship, Lyra finally spoke. "We are facing more than just the challenges of leadership. Ethan," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "There are enemies closer than we think." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Enemies? Who?" Lyra's expression darkened. "It is not just external threats we must worry about. There are factions within my own court, powerful individuals who do not want this union. They believe that a human by my side will weaken my rule." Ethan's heart sank. He had feared that there would be those who opposed him, but hearing it from Lyra made it feel all too real. The prophecy had already been a point of tension, but now it seemed like it was more than just a matter of belief. There were people willing to go to any lengths to break them apart. Lyra stood, pacing slowly across the room. "There are those who would rather see me fail than accept change. They want to undermine my authority, and you are their target." Ethan stood up too, his fists clenching. "How do we stop them?" Lyra turned to face him, her eyes hard but filled with sadness. "I don't know yet, but there's a traitor among us. Someone who has been feeding information to my enemies. I can feel it." Ethan could see the weight of the situation on her shoulders. She had always been strong, commanding, but this was something different. This was betrayal from within, and it hurt more than any external threat. Ethan had seen the toll that betrayal could take on a person. He had experienced it before back on Earth, but he had never seen it so close to someone he cared about. Who could it be? Ethan asked, his voice low. Lyra hesitated, her eyes narrowing as if she were searching her mind for the answer. "I don't know, but I will find out. I must." The next few days were tense. Ethan stayed close to Lyra, trying to support her in any way he could, but there was no escaping the growing sense of distrust that filled the air. Lyra's advisors and the leaders of the various Zyphar factions seemed to be watching them more closely, their words sometimes laced with hidden meanings. Even the warriors who once looked at Ethan with respect now seemed to treat him with suspicion. One evening, as they sat in a meeting with a small group of trusted advisors, the air was thick with tension. Lyra was discussing the state of the Empire, but Ethan could tell her mind was elsewhere. Her gaze kept darting toward the doors as if she were expecting someone who hadn't arrived. "Your Majesty," one of the advisors, a middle-aged Zyphar man named Tarek, said with a bow, "there is a report from the Western colonies. They are experiencing unrest." Lyra nodded, but her attention was still divided. Ethan could feel it, the weight of the silence. He glanced around the room, his eyes settling on each advisor. Something wasn't right. Then the door to the chamber opened and a figure entered. It was another Zyphar officer, tall and broad-shouldered. His name was Rovan, and he had always been one of Lyra's most loyal supporters. But tonight there was something about him that seemed off. He held his head a little higher than usual, his eyes locked on Lyra with a strange intensity. "My queen," Rovan said, bowing low. "There is something I must tell you." Lyra's face hardened at the sight of him. "Speak quickly, Rovan, what is it?" The officer stepped forward, his expression cold. "I regret to inform you, Your Majesty, that there has been a breach in the security of the Western colonies. We have uncovered a plot to overthrow your rule, and I believe this plot involves someone within your own circle." Ethan's heart raced. He knew where this was going. Rovan was saying what Lyra had feared. Someone was betraying her. He glanced at Lyra, who had gone pale. The tension in the room was palpable, and Ethan could feel the anger building in her. Lyra stood up abruptly. "Who is it, Rovan?" she demanded. Rovan hesitated for a moment before answering. "I have reason to believe that the traitor is one of your closest advisors, Tarek." Ethan's eyes snapped to Tarek. The older Zyphar man had been with Lyra for years. He had been trusted, respected. Ethan couldn't believe it. But as he looked closer, He saw the shift in Tarek's expression, something that hadn't been there before. Was it guilt? Fear? Ethan couldn't tell. Lyra's face twisted with disbelief. "Tarek?" she repeated. "That's impossible. He has served me loyally." "I'm afraid it is true, Your Majesty," Rovan said, his voice growing colder. "I have uncovered evidence, plans to hand over the Western colonies to your enemies. There are communications that prove Tarek's involvement." Lyra looked at Tarek, her eyes searching his face for any sign of truth. The silence in the room was deafening. Tarek finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Your Majesty, But before he could finish, another voice interrupted, a voice that came from behind Ethan. "It's true," a new figure said, stepping into the room. Ethan turned quickly and his breath caught. It was Lyra's cousin, a woman named Mira, who had always been close to the Queen. She had been one of Lyra's most trusted allies. But now, as she stepped forward, her face was a mask of cold determination. "I've seen the evidence myself," Mira continued. "Tarek has been plotting against you, Lyra. He was never loyal." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, and Ethan could see the pain in her expression. She had trusted Tarek, had seen him as one of her most reliable supporters. The betrayal cut deeper than anything from the outside world. "You've been hiding this from me, Mira," Lyra whispered. Her voice was barely audible. Mira's gaze didn't waver. "It was necessary, Your Majesty. You needed to see the truth for yourself." Ethan felt a cold fury rising within him. He had seen betrayal before, but nothing like this. Tarek had been so close to Lyra. How could he have done this to her? Lyra stood there, her hands clenched into fists, her body shaking with anger. "Tarek, you will answer for this," she said, her voice trembling with fury. As the room filled with silence, Ethan knew that this moment would change everything. Lyra had been betrayed, and there was no turning back. The days following the betrayal were tense. Queen Lyra's trust had been shattered, and Ethan could feel the change in the air. The once warm atmosphere of their shared chambers now felt cold, as if the walls themselves were closing in on them. Tarek, the trusted advisor, had been arrested, and the investigation into the conspiracy continued. But the damage had already been done. Ethan watched Lyra closely during those days. She was no longer the confident, unshakable queen he had first met. She was still strong, still determined, but there was a shadow over her that Ethan hadn't seen before. The weight of betrayal was something that not even her power could easily erase. But through it all, Ethan stood by her. He knew that her strength was not in her throne or her crown. It was in her heart. And that heart had been broken, but it had not been destroyed. One evening, as they sat together in her private chambers, Lyra turned to him, her eyes tired but resolute. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft yet firm, "we cannot allow this betrayal to define us. The galaxy is watching, and we must move forward. If we let this defeat us, then my enemies will have won." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. The betrayal of Tarek was only the beginning. There were still many who wished to see Lyra fall, many who believed that the Zephyr Empire would be better off without her, especially with a human by her side. "We'll face it together," Ethan said, his voice steady. "You don't have to do this alone." Lyra smiled faintly, a small but genuine smile. "I never wanted to do this alone. That's why I chose you." Ethan felt a warmth spread through him at her words. He had never thought of himself as someone special. But here, in this moment, he realized that he had become something more than he ever expected. He wasn't just Lyra's husband. He was her partner. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the days passed, Lyra began to regain her confidence. The investigation into the conspiracy continued, and more allies rallied to her side. But even in the face of all the challenges, Lyra was beginning to see the truth. Ethan was right. She did not have to do this alone. The galaxy was vast, and it was full of dangers and uncertainties. There were those who would always try to tear them apart to weaken their rule. But Lyra knew that as long as they stood together, they could overcome anything. Together they were stronger than any enemy, any betrayal. One day, after a long meeting with her advisors, Lyra turned to Ethan with a determined look in her eyes. "It's time," she said. "We cannot wait any longer. The galaxy needs us to lead, and I need you by my side." Ethan felt a surge of pride at her words. "I'm with you, Lyra," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "Whatever it takes." The next few weeks were filled with action. Lyra and Ethan worked together to strengthen their position within the Empire. reaching out to allies who had remained loyal and trying to sway those who were on the fence. They traveled to different planets within the Zephyr Empire, speaking to leaders, rallying support, and building the foundations of a new future. The more Ethan learned about Lyra's world, the more he realized how complex and fragile the Empire was. It wasn't just about power. It was about relationships, trust, and loyalty. The Zephyr people had been through countless wars and struggles. But the peace Lyra sought was not just for her people. It was for all the species in the galaxy. As they traveled together, Ethan began to see the vastness of Lyra's vision. She was not just a queen. She was a symbol of unity, a beacon of hope for those who wanted peace. Her strength wasn't in her weapons or her title. It was in her ability to bring people together, to see beyond their differences and unite them under one cause. One evening, after a particularly successful meeting with a neighboring planet's leaders, Lyra and Ethan stood together on the balcony of their quarters, looking out at the stars. The lights of distant worlds twinkled in the darkness, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. "You were right," Lyra said softly. "We are stronger together. I can feel it now. I never needed a crown to be a ruler. I just needed to believe in the people I care about." Ethan smiled. "And I believe in you, Lyra. I always have." They stood there for a long time, the quiet hum of the ship in the background. It was in this moment that Ethan truly understood what he had become. He was not just a visitor in this galaxy anymore. He was part of something bigger than himself. He was part of Lyra's vision, her dream of a united galaxy, a galaxy where peace could finally thrive, and together, they would make that dream a reality. Days turned into weeks, and the alliance between Lyra and Ethan grew stronger. As the Zephyr people began to see the truth of what Lyra had always known, they rallied behind her in greater numbers. The betrayals of the past faded, and the future became clearer with each passing day. Ethan stood by Lyra's side as she addressed the entire Zephyr Empire, speaking to the galaxy for the first time as its unified rulers. "The time for division is over," she declared, her voice ringing through the vast hall. "Together we will stand as one. Together, we will build a future of peace, strength, and understanding." The crowd erupted in applause, and Ethan stood tall beside her, proud of the woman he had come to love. He wasn't just standing by her side as her husband. He was standing as an equal, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The future of the galaxy was uncertain, but with Lyra by his side, Ethan knew one thing for sure. They would face it together. And together they would build a future where peace could finally take root, where love could overcome the darkest of times. And as they looked out over the galaxy, the stars shining brightly in the distance, Ethan knew that this was only the beginning.